there is actually a hyper-intelligent being on this planet or in this planet. It perhaps is this planet, but it is sentient. It thinks. It can communicate. We are like atoms inside the body or cells inside the body of this enormous organism. Shamanism is essentially a going into a higher dimension to obtain information that then feeds back into the group destiny. Well, how can these shamans know this stuff? How can they attain to this superhuman level of understanding? It's that they get in touch with a different kind of intelligence, an intelligence to whom where the game will be next year is as transparent as where the game was last year, because past and future don't exist for that intelligence. And our relationship to that intelligence was one of devotee to goddess or supplicant to mystery. But eventually the connection was broken, and meanwhile the ego was arising, and the ego is like a mirroring of this larger psychic function. In other words, the ego is our pathetic attempt to create God on our own. This was Julian Jaynes' theory. He thought, you see, that up until as late as Homeric times, which is 800 BC, that if you got into a tight spot and were about to be offed or something, miraculously a voice would appear, would come on. It would just turn on in your head, and it would say, "You should get out of there." And I take orders from this inner God, and if it is allowed to develop, and it's strange, it always develops along these patriarchal lines, you know. It brooks no babbling. It's not interested in argument. It knows what is to be done. And then the only time you get a problem is when you place one ego in contact with another. And then, of course, they go at it, hammer and tongs. But originally what we had was a symbiotic relationship with this Gaian mind. This is what all this goddess talk is about, is either we are becoming more sensitive to the presence of the Gaian mind, or the Gaian mind, under pressure of the approaching apocalyptic crisis, is beginning to raise its voice louder and louder and louder, so that now, you know, when you go into nature loaded, every rock, every tree, every stream is saying, "Awaken, awaken, come to focus. There's minutes to go," as William Burroughs likes to say, you know. So we have to connect up. And so we are, in a sense, the hands of this diffuse supermind that is spread through nature. And our presence as thinking, reflecting, culture-building individuals is not simply an amazing but meaningless set of circumstances. Our presence as a global technical civilization signifies the onset of the final crisis. It's as though, you know, you watch a pond and the surface is smooth, mirror smooth. Well, then the surface of the pond begins to churn. This is the signal that something huge is about to emerge out of the pond. And human history is that turbulence on the still surface of nature. Nature would never have allowed a phenomenon like human history to get going were it not in response to a deeply felt planetary crisis that is approaching at ever accelerating speed, we have to go back to the archaic solution, which is, and it can't be orgy. That can't be the archaic solution that we implement, because we're not a nomadic tribe of pastoralists, only 70 or 80 human beings. We're a global culture of 5 billion people. If hortatory beating on people could have worked, then we would have solved all our problems thousands of years ago, because Buddha and Christ and all these other people, they had the right idea. It's just that ideas don't cut the mustard. It has to be an experience, a real experience. And a boundary-dissolving experience is so corrosive. And I have enough faith in nature to believe that when the moment finally is upon us, we'll be ready. But the tools are being laid up right now. We have the technologies and the informational structures and all the necessary abilities to create paradise on earth, to lift up the least among us to at least an acceptable level of comfort and freedom. Why do we not do that? Because what stands in our way is our own minds, our own habits. We must change our minds. That's the most powerful political work people in this room could do. And there is nobody who is so enlightened that they don't need to work on themselves and do this. To the degree that we can change our minds, we will escape extinction, marginality. And notice that it's not only a way to save the planet, it's in a sense a way to save not only ourselves, but to save our ancestors as well. This, if we can act in a moment of great crisis to preserve the planet from ruination, we will redeem human history. Then it all makes sense. The pogroms, the migrations, the brutality, the stupidity, it was all toward a purpose. And then somehow those lives that were lost in those pogroms and invasions and migrations and so forth are given meaning. A meaning which they will totally not have if we simply blow the planet apart and wreck nature and ruin the oceans and blow off the atmosphere. Then it just looks like a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury that signifies nothing. So it's as though the meaning itself is in our hands. What shall we make of this? Is it just, as James Joyce said, atoms and ifs? Or is there a plan, a process, a plot, and a role for us that will give us some dignity in this situation, which otherwise, up to this point, as far as I can see, we totally lack. I mean, it's all very well to spend an afternoon wandering around the Louvre, but on the other hand, spend the next day wandering around the slums of Calcutta, and you just really have to wonder about what the human enterprise is about. So now I will read you this little quote from Moby Dick, which sort of gets to some of this. Are you all familiar with Moby Dick? Are any of you familiar with Moby Dick? You should be. I mean, this is the greatest work of prose ever written by an American without contest, I think. I mean, I like to think that when human history is written, Americans will be remembered for two things. They went to the moon, and they're the people who produced Moby Dick. I mean, this is our Odyssey. This is our Odyssey and our Iliad. Nobody's ever gone past it. Okay, there's a scene early on. You all know that it's a whale hunt, right? Okay, so there is a scene where the captain who is running this show and driving this thing, this hunt for this whale, to a truly apocalyptic conclusion, because for him this is no hunt for an animal, this is a confrontation with an alien god, and he is determined to murder this thing because it, as he delicately puts it, dismasted him, meaning it bit off his leg and destroyed his sexual machinery. And his first mate, who functions as Christian right reason, wimpy little Starbuck, says, "Vengeance on a dumb brute," cried Starbuck, "that simply smote thee from blindest instinct? Madness! To be enraged with a dumb thing, Captain Ahab, seems blasphemy." And Ahab says, "Hark ye yet again the little lower layer. All visible objects, man, are but as pasteboard masks. But in each event, in the living act, the undoubted deed, there some unknown but still reasoning thing puts forth the moldings of its features from behind the unreasoning mask. If man will strike, strike through the mask. How can the prisoner reach outside except by thrusting through the wall? To me, the white whale is that wall, shoved near to me. Sometimes I think there is naught beyond, but 'tis enough. He tasks me, he heaps me. I see in him outrageous strength, with an inscrutable malice sinnowing it. That inscrutable thing is chiefly what I hate. And be the white whale agent, or be the white whale principal, I will wreak that hate upon him. Talk not to me of blasphemy. I would strike out the sun if it insulted me. For could it do that, then could I do the other, since there is ever a sort of fair play." And that was the point I wanted to make, about 2 points: striking through the mask to achieve reality, and that we can do it, because there is ever a sort of fair play. The field is level. The cards are not stacked against us. If we play our hand right, we can take the whole game. They wouldn't have it any other way.